Hello and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on my playlist, Dining with the Damned, where we discuss criminals who have been sentenced to die. We talk about their crimes, we talk about how they ended up on death row, and then I show you and taste their last meal. I'm Stacey Lee. Let's begin. This was a tough case to find information on, and there's a reason for that. It happened during the height of the gang wars and the drug wars in the 90s. There was so much death and violence back then that the cases didn't really get a lot of media coverage. And let's be honest, the media doesn't look at people who choose to get involved in the drug world as the same kind of victim as someone who does not. But the bottom line is that every murder victim's murder matters, every one of their lives mattered, and that's why I choose to cover these cases. I don't think that just because somebody does something illegal, it means they deserve to die. This was an era where people were killing each other regularly over drugs, and the media just kind of stopped reporting on it. However, we have a lot of information about this person and these crimes after he was convicted because of what happened in the courts. The people involved in this case ended up filing a lawsuit against the federal government, and the lawsuit was taken very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that it stopped federal executions in this country for 17 years. One of those people was Corey Johnson. Corey Johnson doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Like I said, this case was really difficult to find information on. Corey was born on November 5th, 1968, and he lived a hard life by all accounts. I couldn't find much on his early life, but I did find information that said everyone in that life in his area had it pretty rough. He got involved in street life early on, and before long, he was in a gang. Corey partnered up with James Roane and Richard Tipton, and the three of them set up a very substantial drug trafficking ring that started around 1989 in Trenton, New Jersey. In August of 1990, the ring expanded to Richmond, Virginia. I did some research on this era and what was going on in the drug world back then. There's a lot of information that said if you were in that world, it was vital to have ties to Virginia or somewhere in that area because so much of the product, I have to be careful what I say here, was manufactured in that area. Corey was a pretty smart guy. He was very street smart, and he knew that if they wanted to be closer to their product, they needed to be in Virginia. I literally have no idea what you can say and what you can't say here on this platform anymore. It has gotten so ridiculous. When you can't say actual words that have meaning that are not explicit, it's gone too far. I can't say things here anymore that you can see on the noon news while you're sitting with your grandma having a cup of tea. It's a joke. So be patient with your favorite YouTubers and with creators because we just have no idea what's going on. They give you these rules of things that you can't show or can't say, but in there's a lot of gray area. There's not like a list of words that you can't say. There's not a list of things you can't, it doesn't work like that. They're just, does your video promote this or does your video discuss this? And then sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. I will put up one video where I'm like, this is for sure going to get a limited ads thing on it, and it's fine. And then I'll put up something where I don't even worry about it, and it comes back that it can't be monetized. I've had quite a few people tell me lately that even though they have the notifications turned on for my channel, they don't get notifications for my channel. So it's just, it's the nature of the beast. So be kind. In 1991, the police, who had been aware of Corey, Richard, and James' actions for some time, got information from a confidential informant that there was a large stash of cash and supplies at a house in Trenton. The police raided that house and confiscated a very large quantity of not only snap, crackle, and pop, is what I'm going to call it here, but also firearms. That was kind of it for the New Jersey operation. Once Corey and the others found out that the cops were onto them, they pretty much moved their operations to Virginia. They set up shop and were based in the Central Gardens area of Richmond. Now, this was a very big operation. This was not like a couple of guys slinging stuff on the street. They would bring certain things in from other countries, and then other things that were manufactured in the South, they would distribute that as well. Now, as all of this movement was happening, moving product around, obviously there's other things going on. When people move this volume of product, there's always a lot of violence surrounding that activity. people around Corey Johnson started disappearing. Starting in about 1992, it became very apparent to the authorities that were watching this ring that people who crossed Corey or those working with him were in danger. There were even a couple of cases where people disappeared simply over what was seen as a slight or some small form of disrespect for Corey, Richard, or James. On January 4th, 1992, Richard and James drove a man named Douglas Talley to the south side of Richmond. The leaders of this gang felt that Douglas had botched a transaction and it brought some heat on the gang. They took Douglas out to a remote area and they forced him out of the car. James grabbed Douglas from the rear and Richard stabbed him repeatedly, like 84 times repeatedly. These were vicious, violent, dangerous men who had no problem engaging in brutality. A week or so later, on January 13th, James and Richard walked right into an apartment of one of their rivals, a man named Douglas Moody, and shot him twice in the back as he ran from them. Douglas jumped out a window and James and Richard followed him. They caught him and Richard stabbed Douglas 18 times as James held him down. The very next night, Corey and James went after another rival, a man named Peyton, at a bar. Corey Johnson walked into the bar and gunned Peyton down with a semi-automatic gun. Not even 2 weeks later, Corey and James were involved in another murder, again of someone that they saw as a rival. Anyone who threatened their territory, anyone who threatened the sale of their product was in danger. Just a couple days after that, on February 1st, 1992, Corey and a man named Lance Thomas went to Torrick Brown's home after Torrick got into an altercation with James. They barged in with semi-automatic weapons and demanded that Torrick's sister tell them where he was. Torrick's sister yelled for him to come to the door, and when he did, Corey shot him and killed him, and in the process, seriously wounded his sister. These guys were on a rampage. They didn't seem to be worried about getting caught. And yes, I did just get finished talking about how every murder matters and needs to be covered. I'm also okay with saying these kinds of dangerous criminals who have shown they have no regard for human life should be locked up for good or executed. I think when you behave this way, when you show us that you cannot be a member of society that doesn't hurt or kill people, you don't get to be part of our society. These kind of cases are pretty cut and dried in my eyes. There are a lot that aren't, but this ain't one of them. This killing goes on, and by the time the cops have enough evidence to really start pinning some charges on Corey and his gang, 10 people are missing or confirmed dead. These guys were doing things like calling people to come and meet with them, and then as soon as the person would pull up, one of them would step out and shoot them before their car was even in park. They shot people in their front yards. They shot people who were running away. Just really cowardly chicken shit type stuff. Really vicious and remorseless, ugly things. In February of 1992, Corey Johnson had become convinced that an associate of his named Linwood Childs was working with the police. Linwood was one of those people who was shot just sitting in his car. No warning, no discussion, no chance to defend himself. It was just a really brutal time. Fortunately, the police were paying attention, and soon they had enough evidence to file charges against the gang. Richard Tipton was arrested and charged with 8 counts of capital murder. Corey Johnson was arrested and charged with 7 counts for the murders of Johnson, Long, Carter, Armstrong, Thorne, Childs, and Peyton. James Roane was charged in 3 of those deaths. Richard Tipton was tried and convicted of 6 of the 8 deaths he was accused of, along with multiple counts involving the business that they were in. Then Corey Johnson went to trial. He was convicted on all 7 counts of capital murder, along with intent to distribute and other charges. The penalty phase of that trial came next, and the jury recommended that Corey Johnson be sentenced to death. He was sent off to death row, where the usual long appeals process began. Now, some of you might be aware of this situation. Like I said at the beginning of this video, in this country, there was a 17-year span of suspension on all federal executions. There are state executions and there are federal executions. There are a lot of reasons why someone would be charged by the state versus being charged federally. All federal executions are carried out at the Terre Haute, Indiana facility, and they only do lethal injections there. There weren't any federal executions in 2005, and then in 2006, the group of prisoners that we're talking about today filed suit in a case known as Roane v. Gonzales, And yes, that's James Roane's name at the top of the heading. As you can see here, our three dealers, our three prisoners, filed suit against the Attorney General and the DEA and the prison system, among others, making an argument that the cocktail of drugs used to lethally inject a human being had the potential to cause cruel and unusual punishment to a prisoner, which is something that violates their civil rights. There is one drug in the cocktail of lethal injection drugs that is very difficult to get because not a lot of it is produced. The Department of Justice replied to this filing by these prisoners, stating that that drug was no longer being used and it had been replaced by a different, more effective drug. This legal wrangling went on for many years until the case made its way to the Supreme Court. In June of 2020, the Supreme Court ruled, denying all of the claims made in the filing. Once that ruling was made, federal executions began again. After 17 years, there were quite a few prisoners who thought they might have escaped their fate, but that wasn't the case. Once the federal executions started, they continued in rapid succession. Corey Johnson made a last-ditch plea. His attorneys filed claims that because Corey had contracted COVID and apparently had a very severe case of it because he got it before the vaccination was available, he had very serious scarring in his lungs and he had a lot of pain associated with breathing. They also made an argument that Corey was mentally impaired because of his COVID battle. Corey's attorney stated that due to his mental and physical condition, he should not be executed as it would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. His request for a stay was denied, and on January 14, 2021, he was taken off death row and led to the cell reserved for those about to be executed. He was given a last meal, which of course I'm going to show you, and then he was led to the death chamber where he was executed. I was very fortunate to find a clip where a reporter who was actually at the execution gives her first-hand account of the event. This is unusual, something we don't see very often, the telling of the execution from someone who was there. So I'll let her describe what happened.
Corey Johnson is now the 12th inmate to be federally executed since July in Terre Haute. He died just before 11:35 last night.
He was sentenced to death in 1993 in connection with 7 murders. News 10's Sarah Lehman was the media witness for Johnson's execution.
And new for you this morning, Sarah tells us what she saw behind prison walls.
Corey Johnson was set to be executed at 6 o'clock Thursday night. Because of litigation to the Supreme Court, his execution was delayed by about 5 hours. His legal team argued 2 main points. One, Johnson was not intellectually fit enough to understand what was going on. 2, because he had just gotten over COVID-19, the lethal injection would be more painful for his scarred lungs. After a few hours, the Supreme Court denied any stay of execution for Johnson. Blinds in the execution chamber went up just a little after 11. Johnson was glancing and waving to the room next to the media witnesses. That's where his family and friends are. When asked if he had any final words, Johnson said, "No, I'm okay," and then quickly said, "Love you." Then lethal injections started. Johnson showed very little outward signs of pain or discomfort. During his execution, I could hear someone almost chanting in the room next to us. I don't know what they were saying, but it almost sounded like, "We love you, Corey," over and over again. At around 11:32, the medical examiner came in and checked his heartbeat, pulse, and breathing. Johnson's time of death was called at 11:34. When the federal employee officially called Johnson's time of death and concluded the execution, the other media witnesses and I heard people clapping and whistling, almost as if in celebration. Another media witness said they saw it coming from the room where the victim's family and friends are held. This was the first time in the 4 executions I have watched I've heard anyone other than federal employees or the inmate. About an hour after the execution, we received a statement from Johnson's attorney and Johnson himself. In part, Johnson said he is sorry for his crimes. He said he's not the man he was back then.
So what did Corey Johnson request for his last meal? I'm going to show you. He asked for a pizza, he asked for a strawberry milkshake, and he asked for a box of jelly donuts, which he did not get. Apparently at his execution, he made his last statement and then he said, I didn't get my jelly donuts. What's with that? I know there are people who feel like the prisoners shouldn't get anything. They shouldn't get any of their requests met. They've done terrible things, and I completely understand that thinking. There's just something in my mom heart. I can't help it. I feel like that last meal, I don't know, it's just such a human thing to give someone what they want to eat, you know? It's a very humane gesture. And I think that if we want to consider ourselves better than these people, we have to treat them humanely. So I wish Corey would have had what he requested, but he only got part of it. I found out from you guys that if the prisoners request pizza, they get a little frozen pizza like this. If they request Domino's or Pizza Hut or something like that, sometimes they will get that for them. So I've just got here what they would be given. I love a fancy meal, but sometimes I love me a little $5 frozen pizza. Now, I did put extra cheese on this and pepperoni because I'm gonna eat it. You know your girl is gotta have a little extra cheese. But yeah, sometimes they're good. I have only had strawberry ice cream a couple of times in the last 20 years, and they've both been while I've been recording for the channel. Strawberry milkshake. Woo! Oh, that is good. That's better than strawberry ice cream. I mean, it is strawberry ice cream, but there's something about it, at that texture, that viscosity, as we would say in the cooking world, that makes it better. Ooh, how that is good. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, Dining with the Damned. Hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel if you would like to support me. The other thing you can do to support me is join my Patreon. So if you want to sign up on Patreon, it helps, and you also get some bonuses. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.